jungle.
Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is May 27th, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
So, the last 2 weeks, Bobby, have been very heavy with news, but this week really kind of flew under the radar for the most part. There was some things that happened, but definitely not as hectic as we've seen recently.
Oh, I think the exact opposite. This was a very busy week with a lot of stuff that was going on, and we're going to cover it all here in the show that you're about to listen to.
Yeah, so let's get straight into it then with the first thing that we want to get into, which is the call for a second special counsel.
Yes. A group of 17 Republican House members, led by Representative Lee Zeldin of New York, have authored a 12-page resolution accusing the Justice Department and the FBI of misconduct in investigating the 2016 Trump campaign, as well as calling for a second special counsel. The resolution comes a day after the DOJ announced that it requested that Inspector General Michael Horowitz expand his review of the FBI's Russia collusion investigation to include possible politically based abuses. The DOJ has also instructed Horowitz to bring charges against any FBI personnel found guilty of criminal conduct during the Trump-Russia investigation. In a statement, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said, quote, "If anyone did infiltrate or surveil participants in a presidential campaign for inappropriate purposes, we need to know about it and take appropriate action." President Trump tweeted hours before the release, demanding an investigation into FISA abuse by the FBI and DOJ and possible political spying on his campaign by the Obama administration. So there you go. They've officially called for a second special counsel because of the abuses. I mean, we've documented this on the show, almost every single week since these stories started breaking. It seems like we've been talking about these stories for months now. But do you think that there actually will be a second special counsel that's put in, Enzo?
I am very unsure on it. I mean, I think it's necessary, although I don't like special counsels much to begin with. But I just think it's so crazy now we have a counsel to investigate another counsel. And, that's why I said I don't like special counsels, because they're so, uncontrollable to the degree that now we need to investigate another one.
Not only that, but I hate the precedent that this is setting, in that every president from now on is going to have some sort of special counsel investigating any crimes that the past presidents might have made, and I feel like that's something that's going to continue to go forward, especially if a Democrat wins in 2020 or 2024. They're going to try to investigate every single wrongdoing that the Trump administration might have done. So I just hate the fact that that's the precedent that it seems like we're going for here in the future. But that being said, I kind of think that we need one, because even though the Mueller probe is kind of winding down right now, it needed to be ended a long time ago. We know that there was FISA abuse. People like to throw the word alleged around, but at this point, it's pretty clear exactly what was going on there. So there definitely needs to be a second special counsel, in my opinion, and definitely investigate these people. And if you find anybody there that's broken the law as part of the the official Mueller probe or the Trump-Russia investigation that isn't Mueller-based, definitely arrest these people and make sure that they never work in government again.
Yeah, so while on the topic of, infiltration of the Trump campaign, a Trump campaign advisor has now said that there was a second spy in the campaign.
Yeah. Former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo, during an interview with Fox News' Laura Ingraham, claimed that he was approached by a second government informant while he was working for the 2016 Trump campaign. Caputo also claims that the second informant did not work for the FBI, but worked for a different government agency, which currently is rumored to be the NSA. He said that he is speaking to his lawyer before he's going to be revealing any more information to the public, and that news came just days after it was revealed that Cambridge professor Stephen Halper was outed as the spy on the Trump campaign that was working for the FBI. Public records also showed that Harper was paid $282,000 at the end of September of 2016 for work titled India and China Econ Study, according to USAspending.gov. Harper was also paid a second time in July 2017 for $129,000. And also, the contents of that work are presently unknown. So it appears that this guy was paid, $400,000 for his work, essentially spying on the Trump campaign, because that's what he was doing at that time period. So if it's really revealed that the Obama administration paid the guy almost $500,000 for this, that does not look good, especially since they haven't released that work yet.
Yeah, and they're just using these studies as a means to claim that they're paying him for something else, not, infiltrating the Trump campaign.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear.
At least that's what we're led to believe.
Yeah, definitely. And so things are not looking good for those type of people right now, especially as more and more information keeps getting released.
Yeah, so that kind of ties in well with the next thing that we have actually here, which is Obama White House officials coordinated with CNN to attack Trump. So on Monday night, the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs released new emails that allegedly show that Obama administration officials coordinated with each other to help CNN run a damaging story on then-candidate Donald Trump. The emails obtained by Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson shows that Obama-era officials used coded language to refer to the Steele dossier. So let me go through the timeline of these emails, with including what was happening in real life, because you kind of need a frame of reference for it. So on January 6, 2017, FBI Chief of Staff James Rybicki sent an email to unspecified recipients stating, quote, "The director is coming into HQ briefly now for an update from the sensitive matter team." And that was at 9:44 that day. So the same day in the afternoon, that was when Comey met with President-elect Trump. And then the next day, January 7, 2017, Director Comey memorialized his discussions with President-elect Trump via an email to Senator FBI leadership. Director Comey wrote, quote, "I said there was something that Clapper wanted me to speak to President-elect about alone, or in a very small group," Director Comey wrote. "I then executed the sessions exactly as I had planned, and I said media like CNN had them and were looking for a new hook." So what they're referencing here is when Trump is first told about the existence of the Steele dossier, if you can remember back what was happening then. Moving on, though, in the timeline, January 8th, 2017 at 12:08 p.m., then FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe sent an email to senior FBI leadership with the subject line, "Flood is coming." Mr. McCabe wrote, "CNN is close to going forward with the sensitive story. The trigger for them being CNN, is they know the material was discussed in the brief and presented in an attachment." So, at this point you can show that Comey was in direct communication with CNN. That would be the only way that they would know what was said in the meeting to Trump, which happened the day before. So moving along in the timeline, now we go on to January 8th, 2017 at 12:55 p.m. So just, a bit over 45 minutes later, Mr. McCabe emailed then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates and then Principal Deputy Attorney General Matthew Axelrod with the subject line, "News." Mr. McCabe wrote, "Just an FYI, as expected, it seems CNN is close to running a story about the sensitive reporting." So what this all shows is senior officials in the Obama administration all knew about the Steele dossier, and they disclosed the information to CNN, and CNN was in communication back to them that they were going to release this stuff. And this is, the precedent that set pretty much the entire Russian narrative moving forward. So 2 days later, on January January 10th is when CNN ran the story on the Steele dossier, just to keep this all in context. And I don't know, it's very damning evidence that we have revealed to us now.
Yeah, and it's not like we didn't know that's kind of what they were doing, especially with the fact that there were so many leaks that were coming out around that same exact time period. It's not surprising, especially since it was CNN, with the political bias that we know that these different networks and media outlets have, especially with the Obama administration and how they would talk to each other all the time. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like, what are you going to do? You know, I mean, we knew these people were doing this back then. We have evidence to show that they were doing it right now. So at this point, it's nothing more than just kind of, you know, yeah, these people were absolutely corrupt. Let's move on with it and make sure this stuff doesn't happen again. But it also, at the same time, shows you that, yeah, they were in on this whole thing the entire time, and the Russian collusion narrative was fake from the entire time, from the get-go.
And, you know, leaking the information that Trump received from those meetings is illegal.
Absolutely.
You know. But there's no investigation into that. You know, Comey has been asked if there's any FBI investigation into these matters, and, you know, he laughed at the idea that you'd even need to.
Yeah.
So it's really just crazy that this is the level of corruption and collusion that we dealt with the Obama administration. But moving on from that, let's go into one of the weirdest things I think that happened this week, and that is a judge ruled that Trump is not allowed to block people on Twitter. So, U.S. District Judge Naomi Reese Buchwald ruled on Wednesday that President Trump cannot block people from his Twitter account, saying the account became a public forum once he started using it for government business is now protected by the First Amendment. Quote, the blocking of the individual plaintiffs from the at Real Donald Trump account because of their expressed political views violates the First Amendment, declared Buchwald, a Clinton appointee who serves on the court in New York. Buchwald claims that the tweets announcing Trump's plans to reinstate a ban on transgender troops serving the military, his announcement for his nominee for FBI director, and the removal of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson from the account made the account a public forum. So, I don't agree with the ruling, but, you know, there's not really any precedent set on these issues as of now. So, this stuff is going to have a huge impact on the scene of social media as a public forum going forward, and I don't know if it's the best thing.
Well, I mean, in terms of how the way that I see this, there is two ways to look at this. The first way is the whole libertarian argument side. That would be, yeah, Twitter's a private company, and, you know, they can set their own rules for their website how they want. The other side of me sees it as more, you know, you should be respecting, you know, freedoms, especially First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, press, etc., especially when you have, you know, websites like Twitter, which Twitter has said that they want to be like a public forum, essentially is what they want to say. Yet at the same time, we know that they ban people for have conservative speech. We know that they, you know, shadow ban people that are conservatives. And same thing happens with Facebook and other media websites as well. And so it's not like you can actually enforce this, because what are you going to do? Like force Donald Trump at gunpoint to unblock people on Twitter? No, you're not exactly going to be able to do that. So I disagree with the fact that, you know, with how they came to that conclusion, saying, oh, you know, it's because of the fact that he's announcing official policies on this account, therefore it's a public forum. I disagree with that, but at the same time, you know, I like the precedent that this sets, is that, okay, well, if Trump can't block people on Twitter, does that mean that other officials can't block people from their accounts? And, you know, the people that were Trump is blocking a lot of times are people that were just trolling in his comment section, adding nothing to the conversation. Just, you know, you'll see Donald Trump could say something and just be like, Happy Veterans Day, and people would post like middle finger emojis to the guy. And, you know, it's like, yeah, I would block these people too. It's not like they're, you know, it's not like they're adding any discourse. It's not like their opinion means anything. I hate these people, and, you know, half the people I've blocked them as well. So it's one big back and forth, but, you know, I do think that the internet should be free and open. I don't think that social media websites should ban or block people for their political beliefs. If you're going to ban or block people, do it only after they've posted something that's like a credible threat of violence or, you know, harassment, stuff like that. If people just have political beliefs, you should not be banning or blocking them for their political beliefs. That's my personal opinion, and so because of that, I have to both agree and disagree with this court's ruling. But I like the precedent that it sets going forward, because if you can actually use this in order to get other people out, then all of a sudden the internet just becomes more free and more open for more people, which is something that I do want to see.
I just think it's kind of strange in the sense that, he has the @POTUS account, which is the official governmental account, and this is the real Donald Trump account that he had prior to even becoming president.
Yeah, this is his personal Twitter account.
Yeah, but now his personal Twitter account is considered a public forum as well. I could kind of understand the argument for his official account.
Oh, I could. Yeah, if this was his official account, I would have absolutely no problems with what that person said, or what that judge said. So,
yeah. But let's move on from this to the last thing that we have for the top of the news, and that is an executive order Trump signed this week on Friday.
Yes, on Friday, President Trump signed a series of executive orders making it easier to fire federal workers. Now, there are 3 orders, and we're going to go through what each order does. The first order makes it easier to fire and discipline federal employees, which the administration believes had become too lengthy and difficult a process. It frequently takes 6 months to a year to fire a poor-performing employee, followed by an appeals process that can take up to 8 months. The second order deals with renegotiating contracts with government employee unions so as to reduce waste. This way, the government won't have to pay for both sides when unions appeal cases on behalf of fired federal workers. They will also begin posting union contracts online. The third order limits the amount of official time in which government workers with union roles are allowed to perform those roles during normal working hours, for which they draw their usual salary, up to 25% of their hours during the year. Previously, there was no cap on the amount of hours that they were allowed to work on that. This order alone is said to save the government over $100 million a year. So that's really, really big news there. And according to the American Federation of Government Employees Union, more than 1,600 workers have been fired under provisions from the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act that was passed last year. So, if you're trying to drain the swamp, this is the way to go about it. These orders are going to make it a lot easier to do that and limit the amount that government employee unions are able to have over the workers that are there in government jobs. So I'm fully happy with these 3 orders. Would I've liked to see them sign a long time ago? Yeah, but, better late than never, and they're here. And I'm glad that it's going to save the government a lot of money and get people out of those jobs that do not need to be working there that should have been fired also a long time ago.
Yeah, the biggest thing definitely is just the time and difficulty it takes to fire anyone that's underperforming, or, even it's difficult to fire people that you have evidence of their misdeeds.
Yeah.
So, definitely that helps a bunch. Let's talk now about some stuff that's happened economically this week, starting with some changes to Dodd-Frank.
Yes. On Thursday, President Trump fulfilled a campaign promise by signing into law a law to ease some of the financial restrictions that were created under the DoddFrank Act that was passed in wake of the 2008 financial crisis. The new law raises the, quote, too big to fail threshold from banks from $50 billion in assets to $250 billion in assets. Banks with this much money are subject to higher levels of testing and regulation. It also allows pressure to be taken off of mid-sized banks in favor of leaving it on just the larger ones, which was kind of the whole point of that law to begin with. The new law also eliminates the Volcker rule, which requires banks with assets under $10 billion from making risky investments with their own money. The new law also gives smaller banks a reprieve from mortgage lending rules that requires banks to disclose detailed information on whom they're lending to. Banks with fewer than 500 loans a year no longer have to report racial data of their borrowers. The law also, in wake of the Equifax cyber attack, requires major credit agencies to freeze and unfreeze consumers' credit reports for free. $0, 0 cents. So that's pretty good. I mean, I've never really been a fan of the Dodd-Frank Act. I know that they passed it, right after the financial crisis, shortly, at near the beginning of the Obama administration in 2009, I believe is when they first passed it.
Yeah, I think it was 2009 when it passed.
I know that President Obama was president at the time, so it had to have been in 2009 or 2010. So yeah, I think it was 2009. But this thing, it put a lot of pressure on, especially smaller and mid-sized banks. Which, when people were complaining about the financial crisis, that was almost entirely caused by bigger than medium-sized and larger banks. It wasn't really the small ones that were part of that reason, although they definitely did play a factor in it. But what this law was designed is to put more regulations on bigger banks, and what it did was they kind of made it so that it also put a lot of regulations on mid-sized banks and smaller banks as well. Banks. And so that really hampered and made it a lot more difficult for those banks to be able to actually do business, which is part of the reason that's actually made the bigger banks even bigger since then, just because of the fact that other banks had to go out of business because of this. So if anything, what this should do is it should actually help out smaller and mid-sized banks while keeping a lot of the regulations on the bigger banks. So, if you actually look at how much this is affecting banks in the United States, it's really not affecting the big banks all that much at all because of the fact that a lot of those regulations stay in place on them. What it's really doing is just allowing the smaller and mid-sized banks to be able to do more, than they were previously allowed to do, which should help the American economy a little bit more, especially as people that invest their money use mid-sized banks and smaller banks that they do it with.
Yeah, Dodd-Frank, especially towards smaller banks, has hurt the viability of smaller banks to function. You talk about how they've changed rules on banks with less than $10 billion in assets. These smaller sized banks don't have the workforce, oftentimes to follow all the regulations to the degree that the federal government wanted under Dodd-Frank, and it just wasted a lot of time and money. So it's good that we're getting rid of these regulations. Let's move on now to some numbers on the economy, or at least people's perception of the economy from a new CBS YouGov poll. So according to the poll, nearly 2 in 3 Americans think that the nation's economy is in good shape. 68% of Americans believe that Trump's policies have either had a great deal or somewhat to do with the positive direction of the economy. That's 35% of Americans believing that it had a great deal, and 33% believing that his policies had somewhat of a positive direction in the economy. Only 31% of people believe that Trump's policies are not very or not at all influential on the improvements to the economy. 88% believe that Trump is looking out for the interests of the wealthy, while 49% say that he's looking out for the interests of the middle class. 23% believe that Trump is keeping most of his promises, 26% say he is getting around to them, and 29% believe he is keeping some but breaking others. And lastly, as far as information from the poll, 75% of Republicans say that they would support a candidate supported by Trump, but a majority of independents see an endorsement by Trump of a candidate as a negative. So some interesting numbers on how people are perceiving things at the moment, but generally it shows that most people think that Trump is having a good impact on the economy, and that's helpful for him advancing his causes.
Yeah, and anyone who actually is looking at the economy and looks at the what causes the economy to do good and what causes the economy to go bad, anyone who actually pays attention to this stuff can clearly see that Trump's policies have had a great effect on the economy, and especially since the economy has gone in such a positive direction that we've seen it over the last year and a half or so, which kind of proves that those 31% of people that believe that Trump's policies are not very or not at all influential, these are just people that just aren't paying attention and frankly shouldn't even be voting, which unfortunately means that they're going to be voting Democrat. But yeah, we know the economy is doing great, and it's nice to see polls that show that most Americans, vast majority of Americans, when you're at 68%, that's over 2/3, they definitely do credit Trump for it, which is good news going forward.
Yeah. And, it's often arguable what kind of influence a president can have on the economy. Sometimes it's overstated, but you look at what Trump's been able to do, especially in terms of just deregulation from the executive office. He's had a profound impact on the direction that we've gone. Not even to mention his leadership on getting tax cuts passed.
Yeah, so really good news coming out of there. That's really all I have to say about that one.
So the last thing that I want to talk about is some information from Sentier Research that talk about medium household income. So it shows through their research in a new report this week that median household income has climbed 3% since President Trump has taken office. That stands at from January 2017, the median household income was $59,471 to last month being at $61,483. Adjusted to inflation, median household income is at its highest levels in at least 50 years. Looking at some other numbers, though, the latest IBD TPII Economic Optimism Index is currently at 53.7, which anything at 50 or over is considered optimistic, which shows that as far as economic optimism is concerned, every single month of the Trump administration has been in the positive territory. In terms of quality of life index, it has hit a 14-year high as of May, and the financial stress index is currently also at an all-time low. Looking at Gallup's tracking polls, 67% of Americans think that is a good time to find a quality job in the United States. The highest ever achieved under Barack Obama was only 45%. So a lot of really promising good numbers there. And yeah, you know, we don't try to ham it up with the show and try to be objective as how we see the economy, but things are just objectively good right now.
Yeah, it's hard to actually look at the data and look at the way things are going to, at least economically speaking, it's very hard to look at that and say that things are going in a bad direction right now. You have to do some really strong mental gymnastics, and even then, most people would probably think that you're crazy. So, yeah, good news going forward, and hopefully we get to see even more economic improvement over the next several months to several years as well. So, good news there.
So, do you want to talk about robots now?
Oh, I love talking about robots. You know me. So, we have only one story out of Science and Tech this week, and that is about some robots that apparently are able to now grow human organs. Scientists at the University of Washington School of Medicine have developed an automated system that uses robots to produce human mini organs from stem cells. This new development allows them to produce their organoids, as they're called, at a rapid pace. It's the first time that researchers have been able to mass produce these mini organs from stem cells. The scientists plan to use them in basic research and drug discovery. So essentially, prior to this, the way that they would do it in order to try to, use stem cell research in order to create human organs was have very thin slices of material that were like 1 cell wide. That's how small these slices were. But now they're actually able to make, clumps of cells and stuff that are able to then grow and then, produce the actual organs themselves. They're a lot smaller than current human organs are. When they say mini organs, I mean, we're talking they are very, very small. But, they function relatively similarly to the way that human organs do. So they're not really at the point where they want to start putting these things into people's bodies in order to replace actual organs. We're still very far away from that. However, if you're trying to have
we're on the right path.
Yeah, if you're trying to develop a new testing of a drug, or like they said, just basic research, you can grow these things in a laboratory and then do your research there. And so you might not have to do human testing. You might not have to, cut up human cadavers in order to test human hearts. If you can grow a human heart in a lab and test it there. So that's, in terms of just scientific discovery and research on the human body, this is going to have a profound impact the more that they can actually do it. So, I've never barely been that big a fan of stem cell research myself. But, when you can do things like this, I really have much less of a problem with it.
Yeah, no, and definitely with the potential that stem cells have for creating, repairing organs and whatnot, what we can potentially do in the future with them is just so profound. And it's crazy that, now we're just making organs with robots.
Yeah. I think one day we'll probably reach the point where they'll probably make human organs in laboratories and then be able to put them in human bodies and have it function correctly. When that day comes, you're going to see life expectancy rates skyrocket. But we're still not there yet. One day I think we will get there, and that'll be a huge breakthrough in scientific advancement for humanity. So looking forward to when that day finally does come.
Yeah. So, with that said, let's get into some immigration news.
Open the door! Immigration!
La migra, vamos, niños!
This week in immigration.
So, the first story that we have for immigration this week is kind of a follow-up of the big story last week. You know, you remember last week when Donald Trump called MS-13 gang members animals. Well, turns out this week, an MS-13 gang member, Joel Martinez, nicknamed Animal, was sentenced to 40 years in prison by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts after admitting to murdering a teen boy as part of an initiation into the gang. "I stabbed the culero 3 times," Animal boasted to the officials. "He stared at me and he asked me if I was going to stab him. I told him, yes, the Mara rules you." And when he says Mara, he means Mara Salvatrucha. That is the MS and MS-13. So, you know, last week we were talking about how all these different liberals were so upset about Donald Trump, quote, dehumanizing MS-13 gang members by calling them animals. But here's an instance where they call themselves animals. So.
Yeah. So it's definitely not a funny story because, I mean, he killed a kid, but at the same time, it is a funny story just because of the fact that, you know, you throw this in the media's face.
It's funny context.
Yeah. So, but, you know, I'm glad that the guy got in prison because he murdered someone, and he's lucky that we didn't give him the death penalty, and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, we should have. Yeah.
And, just to say again, they call themselves animals. So,
yeah, because they are.
Moving on, the Trump administration is increasing audits of company compliance of legal workforces. Immigration officials have increased audits of companies to verify that employers are hiring workers from legal work status in order to create a culture of compliance. Under 1986 federal law, employers are required to verify the legal work status of employees. There were 2,282 employer audits opened between October 1st and May 4th, compared to October 2016 to September 2017. That's a 60% increase in audits. Between October 1st and May 4th, there were 594 employees arrested on criminal immigration charges, up from 139 from the previous fiscal year. In the same period of time, there has been 610 civil immigration charges brought up from 172 from the prior year. Derek Brenner, head of ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Unit, told the Associated Press that they have a wave of audits planned for the summer to total well over 5,000 by September 30th, with plans to open as many as 15,000 audits a year, depending on funding and support from other governmental agencies. So this is extremely good stuff and necessary stuff that they're doing to ensure that companies don't try and break the law by hiring illegal aliens to work, which, you know, undercuts wages of American workers.
And it's also nice to see that they're actually going in and arresting the employers themselves for, you know, hiring illegal aliens. That's something that definitely needs to be done in order to deter that from happening in the future. But, you know, I do want to point out that very last thing there that you said about how they plan to have well over 5,000 by the end of September. You know, that's already a 60% increase right now. That would be like almost double or maybe even triple to reach that point by the end of September. And there's one thing that I have noticed over the last couple of weeks in researching just information, and all accounts indicate that over this summer, Trump and his administration look like they're going to start going really hard on immigration. You know, we talk about they're talking about how Trump is going to go hard trying to end catch and release before the midterms are over. You know, go hard because near September, that's when the next spending bill is going to be up, and we know they're going to try to put wall funding in there as well. And so it just seems like it seems that over the last, especially 6 months or so, not much has been done immigration-wise besides DACA stuff. And we know that just got blown up and destroyed. But, you know, for all the problems that we have with the Obama administration, or I'm sorry, not the Obama administration, although we did have a lot of problems with them, for all the problems it seems that we have with the Trump administration not going hard enough on immigration, by all counts, it seems like they're trying to, actually go hard here in the summer leading up to the midterms. So if they do follow through and end up doing that, that is something I definitely do want to see happen.
Yeah. So let's move on from this topic and now move on to some illegal aliens found in a trailer in Texas this week.
In Raymondville, Texas, which if you don't know is about 30 miles north of the border near Brownsville, so down there in South Texas, a trailer truck was stopped on the highway and police found 90 illegal aliens stashed inside. The truck was pulled over during a routine traffic stop, and when the trooper that pulled over the truck discovered the illegal aliens in the back, he immediately called Border Patrol. 2 of those illegal aliens were taken to the hospital, while 86 others were treated on the scene for exhaustion and dehydration. The driver and passenger of the cab were both taken into custody, while Customs and Border Protection moved the illegal aliens to a detention facility for further processing. So it just goes to show you, these people are coming in a lot of different ways. And we need to make sure that, we just had a story last year about how there were like 100 illegal aliens that were found in a truck in San Antonio, and like 10 of them died. Here we have 90 more in a truck. They're coming in a lot of times in very large groups. We talk about, border crossings here and there. Most of the people that sneak into the country illegally, a lot of them aren't coming in by just walking across the border. They're being snuck in. They're being trafficked into this country. In things like the back of trucks. And so it's one of those other things that we sometimes forget about, but we definitely need to step up, as far as I'm concerned, step up enforcement of, trucks and stuff, because this isn't the first time this has happened. I guarantee you it's not the last time. The only reason we even found out about it is for the fact that they got caught, because if they hadn't gotten caught, you'd have 90 more illegal aliens running around this country right now.
Yeah, and it's incalculable to know the exact number on this, but for every, tractor trailer that we stop that's full of illegal aliens, there's at least 2 or 3 more that aren't getting detected. So this is a major problem, especially here in Texas. We've seen this many times.
Yeah, and so many people are like, especially when like the caravan was all in the news. I know we're gonna have a story about that here in a minute. So many people are like, oh my God, you're gonna let these people from the caravan in? It's like, yeah, as bad as that is, look at how much gets snuck in every single day. This is just one truck that was stopped, and like you said, there's 2 and 3 more. If they have, sometimes over 50, 100 people in these trucks. That's way more people than was part of the caravan, and that's people that are being snuck in every single day. And so, you're not going to be able to enforce these laws if you're not able to enforce them. So, it just proves to you how much more we need a wall, as well as just more border security in general, in order to stop these things from happening.
And better enforcement at ports of entry. We shouldn't be allowing trucks to just drive through with trailers.
And it's like, how in the world do you allow these trucks to drive across the border and not check what's in the back? You'd think that you'd be able to like have some sort of like heat scanner or something to tell, hey, there's a bunch of people in the back of this truck, and it's not just filled with like supplies and merchandise that's going to be sold in stores. You'd think that they'd have a way to check that, but it seems like as we said, this isn't the first time this has happened, and we know that they catch these people all the time in these sort of things, and a lot more of them get through. So it really boggles the mind and makes you wonder.
Yeah. Speaking of things that make you wonder, let's talk about some things that they're doing in California right now. So, California lawmakers are poised to be the first state to expand Medicaid benefits to adult illegal aliens at a cost of more than $3 billion a year to California taxpayers. According to Politico, the plan would greatly expand benefits to the children of illegal aliens as well. Quote, California has never waited for the federal government or for a political climate to be able to take leadership on a host of issues, stated State Senator Ricardo Lana, who sponsored the Medicaid expansion bill. According to Senator Lana, the government pays for health services to illegal aliens either way, whether it be by showing up in emergency rooms without proof of insurance or by showing government-issued Medicaid cards. The program is likely to be a magnet for more illegal immigration, and the state has already projected a $1.6 billion deficit at the admission of Governor Jerry Brown.
And it's crazy to think that they're actually going to do this, because if that's going to cost them more than $3 billion a year in order to expand the Medicaid benefits to give them to these illegal aliens that are adults, and yet they have a $1.6 billion deficit, wouldn't that mean that without this plan they would have like a $2 billion surplus? I mean, it would seem that way, would it not?
No, this is that deficit is before this bill is even passed.
So it's just going to make it even worse.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. That's
so,
insane.
like, potentially a $4.6 billion deficit.
Yeah, you're like,
it's deficit spending.
I was gonna say you're doubling. I'm sorry, you're tripling your deficit. Yeah, you're tripling your deficit. You're making it go from 1.6 to 4.6. God, and what's worse is the fact that that money that's being spent isn't entirely coming from California. A lot of that's federal government money that they're going to be using for that as well, because money is fungible, especially when you're dealing with money being divided amongst the states and coming from the federal government. So yeah, it's insane. It's crazy. California, every time they do something insane and weird, you think, how can it get any worse? And yet here we are, it getting worse. It really just makes you wonder.
Now you're going to have all these people in Mexico and Guatemala and whatnot that have some sort of medical ailment that they can't get service for, and now they're going to see going to California as a way to pay for it.
Yeah, because you can sneak into the country illegally, and they're not going to deport you if you're in California. And even then, they're a sanctuary state, so that's not. They're actively trying to keep you there. They don't want you deported.
Yeah.
And then you get everything for free. You get your health care, it's paid for free. You get free schooling for the little kiddos. You get free food if you can, get on some sort of food stamps, which we know a lot of them are on. And so it's like, yeah, you're actively encouraging these people to come here and mooch off of your system at the expense of taxpayers and everybody else. And then these people end up voting and driving and committing crimes. And then you can't do anything about these people because it's a sanctuary state. So I'm glad that there are a lot of cities in California, especially in Orange County, that are fighting back against these sanctuary city policies. And so my heart goes out to these people, and my support goes out to these people as well. Because God, this fight against California, it's only going to get harder, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and after Texas, California is the biggest state for our listener base for the show. So there's a lot of people that listen to the show that are dealing with this, that know the issues firsthand, and it's just I couldn't imagine having to live under a government that sees issues this way. Already California has some of the worst income inequality in the country, only after New York City. And now, with this bill, they're just going to have a magnet for more poor illegal aliens to come, which is going to exacerbate income inequality even worse. And to pay for all of this, California can only increase taxes on their, rich and middle class, which will encourage more people to leave the state, which is already happening to a big degree. So it's going to get even worse. It can only go downwards. It's, Los Angeles, the city itself, already has a homeless population of around 65,000 people. It's insane.
Yeah, and not only that, but I would suggest to anyone that is listening to the show that does live in California and is registered to vote in California, make sure you are voting in these midterms. I know that this week we don't have any primaries that are up this week, but next week after that is California's primary. So make sure you get out there, and if there are candidates that you see on the ballot that are against things like this, by God, support these people. Even if they don't end up winning, get out there and make your voice heard, because your state's not going to be able to survive anymore if they continue doing this. It's barely surviving as it is, and so it's only going to make things worse. And if push comes to shove, when it comes down to that vote to whether or not let that state secede, by God, make sure that they get out of this country.
Yeah. So moving on from that, let's talk about a new initiative to potentially pay for building the border wall.
Yes. Representative Diane Black, who is a Republican from Tennessee, has introduced legislation called the Border Wall Trust Fund Act, which would create a border wall trust fund that would pay for the border wall via crowdsourcing. The bill would allow people to donate any amount of money they want to it, and the funds are specifically designated for, quote, whatever it takes to build the wall, from supplies to salaries, and would be overseen by the Treasury Department. This wouldn't be the first time the government used crowdsourcing to fund a project either. In 1833, the Washington National Monument Society was set up and was given land, raised money, and hired an architect to design what is now the Washington Monument. More recently, in 1996, some corporations, including Target, donated money to pay for restorations to the monument, because apparently it still existed, that society. And a spokeswoman for Representative Black says that she hopes to see the bill head to the president's desk and get signed into law. And I really think that this is probably the way to actually go about this. You see so many people that are just like, why don't they make a GoFundMe for the wall or anything like that? Because everyone's like, I would gladly pay for it. Yeah, we've said that too. And this is a legal thing to do. You can create trust funds that the government will allow people to donate literally unlimited amounts of money to. There is no law preventing you from giving more money to the federal government. And if they do create this, I know that the word trust fund is, not exactly a lot of people's favorite word to use, but I'll just go ahead and, call it that. If you can crowdsource fund paying for the wall, what was it like? I think we did the calculation that, if the wall costs like $20 billion, you divide it amongst it would cost every single Trump voter, 62 million people, like $500 each or something like that. And that there's going to be some rich person that's like, here's $10,000. Would you be able to pay for the entire wall this way? Probably not. But you never know when it comes to some people, because some people might be like, hell yeah, here's $1,000, take it, put it towards building the wall. And also, if you're a Democrat,
estimates I've seen.
Go ahead.
Estimates I've seen is per household, the wall would cost about $120.
Yeah, per household, and that's everybody.
So that's even more reasonable. Yeah,
and that's everybody. And I'm just talking, Trump voters themselves. Because Democrats aren't going to want to pay for the wall, but at the same time, if you're a Democrat in Congress and someone posts this bill up, the only reason that you can have for voting no is saying that you don't want the wall built, and so you don't want anyone to be able to raise money for it. You can't say it's you're raising taxes, because you're definitely not doing that. You can't say it's going to create a lot of overhead, because it's not. If anything, it would maybe like $10,000 a year in overhead at most to be able to set up a trust fund like this. And for government spending money, for how much you're actually raising for the wall, that's absolutely nothing at all. So really, this is something that, if Paul Ryan is still Speaker, he should definitely push to have this bill passed. Although I can easily see him not doing it. But this is definitely something that the Republican Party and high-level people in the Republican Party, especially, your House speakers, your House minority whip, or sorry, not minority, your House majority whips, just your Republican Party leadership definitely needs to get behind this thing and push it, because that Trump would sign this into law if it was actually passed.
Yeah. Moving on from there, let's talk about the caravan that you mentioned earlier. So, according to the Washington Times, more than 450 illegal aliens, part of the caravan traveling from Central America to the U.S. border, actually made it to the country. 122 were arrested jumping the border, while 330 showed up at official ports of entry and applied for asylum status. According to the Justice Department, there has been just 11 prosecutions in California, with a few more in Texas. At the caravan's height, it totaled 1,500 illegal aliens, while only 600 made it to Tijuana just before reaching the border. So,
This is kind of a Nothingburger story, to be honest. I mean, we know that the people that were applying for asylum, when you show up to an official port of entry to apply for asylum, which, we've said that we're going to reject their asylum applications, but they're still allowed to actually apply for those things. And, when we say, they technically made it into the country, well, yeah, even if you're someone who's like crossing the border bridge in order to go through, ports of entry to be let in, you're technically in the country, and that's what they're considering this. So, this is an article that's written to try to, strum up fear that, nothing is being done to stop these people, when, to be honest, 122 of them were arrested crossing the border, and most of them were, released, or when I say released, I mean, if you're caught crossing the border, you can be, turned back and stuff like that. So most of them were, and if you start seeing stories that say that, oh, we're allowing these people's asylum applications to go through and be, completed, that's one thing. But as of right now, like I said, this is kind of a Nothingburger story, to be perfectly honest.
I don't know. The thing that's kind of concerning is prosecutions have been pretty low.
Well, prosecutions have been low because that's for people that weren't caught crossing the border. You understand that? If you're caught crossing the border right then and there, you get turned back. If you're caught in somewhere else, that's when you get prosecuted. Most of them were caught crossing the border and turned back. That's why the number of prosecutions is so low. It's not like only 11 of these 122 are prosecuted, which is kind of what the article wants to make you think is the case, but that's definitely not. It's a fear-mongering article from the right, and I hate to say that, but it's true.
Yeah. Let's move on to something that the Trump administration is looking to do in terms of cutting foreign aid to countries that have illegal aliens in the country.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. President Trump announced on Wednesday that the U.S. will begin to deduct foreign aid from countries whose residents illegally enter the United States. The administration did not specify which countries would be targeted, but mentioned foreign countries refusing to accept deportees. And we have a quote here that President Trump said during an event in New York. He said, quote, "We're going to work out something where every time someone comes in from a certain country, we're going to deduct a rather large amount of money from what we give them in foreign aid, if we give them aid at all. We may just not give them any aid at all. They'll let you think that they're trying to stop this. They are not trying to stop it. I think they encourage people. They don't want the people that we're getting. We know that we know where these people are coming from. We're looking at our whole aid structure, and it's going to be changed very radically. It's already started. And in case you're wondering how much money we give out to other countries, we just have a couple of numbers here that just show you how much is actually given. For reference, Mexico received $87 million in foreign aid in 2016, and El Salvador, where MS-13 originates from, received $332 million in 2015. So, we don't know how much they're going to cut per illegal alien, or they just might start cutting a lot, but, I think both of us agree that we really should not be giving out foreign aid money to other countries. And if you're going to give out any at all, it should definitely not be to countries that are sending illegal aliens to our country. Because if anything, you're essentially paying for them to send their shitty people here to our country. So this is definitely good news, and I'd like to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's go on to the last story for immigration that we have this week, which is not the best of news. On Friday, the Department of Homeland Security announced that they will be issuing 15,000 additional H-2B visas, which allow low-skilled foreign workers to come to the United States to fill seasonal jobs. Each year, H-2B visas are capped at 66,000 by law, but Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was given the ability to approve an additional 69,000 H-2B visas if she believed that there was sufficient need. Businesses such as fisheries, landscaping, and summer tourist destinations have claimed they don't have enough workers to meet demand. Demand is so high this year that they are being given out by lottery to businesses. To qualify for the visas, businesses are required to state that they will sustain irreparable harm without foreign workers. Last year, Kirstjen Nielsen also approved an additional 15,000 visas as a, quote, one-time measure. So this goes to show that it wasn't a one-time measure. She's doing this once again.
Yeah, and I really do not like Kirstjen Nielsen. She's doing a terrible job as far as I'm concerned, leading DHS, and I would seriously hope that Trump fires her or she quits. I know that there was a story a couple weeks ago about how Trump berated her in front of the rest of the cabinet, but yeah, I don't like her at all. She's doing a terrible job. She needs to be fired and replaced with someone better. So the longer she stays in office, that's part of the reason why immigration a lot isn't being done, is because, it goes, we like to point at Trump and blame him for this, but she's the one who's in charge of that agency, and, the blame also lies on her, so, she definitely needs to step up her game or get out.
Yeah, we don't need these visas whatsoever to begin with, but when they get these visas, when they expire, they oftentimes just overstay their visas to begin with. So this visa program encourages illegal immigration. I was reading earlier this week, I believe it was a story out of the Washington Post. I wish I could quote it, But, it was businesses complaining about how they don't have enough illegal alien workers to hire to work in restaurants. And they're saying, I believe this was in South Carolina where they're complaining, which, they have Lindsey Graham that advocates for these kind of things. They're complaining that now they have to pay dishwashers at least $10, and they have to pay people that work in cooking at least $13 to $15. These visas only serve the purpose of not paying those kind of wages to Americans. So, I want these businesses to hire Americans with wages that are sustainable as opposed to encouraging foreigners to come here, which will likely become illegal aliens once their visa is expired. So
you can almost guarantee it.
Stuff. Yeah, it happens quite frequently. So with that said, let's talk about the 2018 elections for a bit.
Yeah, so as we said earlier, can I say this real quick? As we said earlier, there's no primaries that are up this week, but we do have just a couple of stories, to supplement as we get to that. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is how the GOP has several times more money than the DNC currently does. So according to Soros-connected nonprofit organization ProPublica, in April, the Republican National Committee collected $13 million, while the Democratic National Convention only collected $7.8 million in donations. And that total for the Democrats is the lowest midterm figure for the month of April since 2006. Additionally, the GOP has a total of $43.8 million on hand, while the DNC currently has only $8.7 million for the midterms, with $5.3 million in debt.
Yeah, and we've gone over the numbers, seems like almost every month talking about this, and it really has not changed very much. The Republican Party has, tons more money than the Democrat Party does. The Democrat Party is in a ton of debt. The GOP has no debt at all, so that $43.8 million that they have, that's essentially going to go, directly towards funding candidates for these midterms, whereas the Democrat Party itself doesn't have that much money as a whole. I will say one thing, though, and that's the same thing that Democrats do like to point out a lot, is that a lot of the money that Democrats are raising is being given directly to candidates, whereas the GOP is raising money, as a party. And although that makes it seem like, the Democrats are raising more money than it appears, that's not entirely the case, because a lot of these Democrats that are raising money are primary challengers. And because of that, if you have like two Democrats running in a race and both of them raise like $1 million each, only one of them is going to win. Whereas if you have the Republican who's running and is running, essentially having money that's being donated, given to you by the party, you can raise more than $1 million for your candidates, but if one of them loses, then only $1 million of that, the candidate that wins, if your candidate loses and they've raised a ton of money, they can't just give that money to the other candidate. That's not the way that it works. And so a lot of that money that's being raised by Democrats, not necessarily the Democrat Party, is going to end up being wasted in these midterms, especially in fights, against themselves in their own primaries. Because we've talked about how there's, more Democrats running in primaries this year than like any other midterm year in history. Well, it doesn't matter if you have a bunch of them running, because they're going to have to fight amongst themselves. And you're having a lot of establishment Democrat candidates that are having, much farther left people running against them, that drives them farther to the left. And if you've got a lot of like Bernie-type candidates that are raising a ton of money fighting these establishment candidates themselves, that seems great that the Democrats are raising so much money, but they're not going to be able to use that money on the general election if their candidate loses. And so the Republican Party isn't really worried about these primaries themselves in terms of like dissenting challengers. They're more worried about the general election. So, strategically speaking, that's going to help them out better in November.
And another thing to keep in mind is, with all these primary challengers, if someone, say, upsets an incumbent, the DNC is likely not going to give them any money towards their campaign. Not that they have any money to begin with. So it's going to be hard for them. And talking about things that are hard for them, they have another setback this week, which is the GOP has taken the lead in generic polling. So according to Reuters' weekly tracking poll, the GOP has taken a 6-point advantage over the Democrats in generic ballot polling. That is the GOP with 40.7%, while the Democrats only have 34.5%. And this marks the first time this cycle that the Republicans have taken the lead. So we've been talking, month to month now on generic ballot polling. And in January, I believe the Democrats were up 16 points or something. So they've dropped off from 16 points, now being overtaken by 6 points. And considering margin of error is only 3 points, it's demonstrable that the GOP is taking the lead at this point. So, they've been wanting to talk about the blue wave and, meme that into inception, but it's not there. They don't have the money to do it. They don't have the polling at the moment that shows that they're doing it. And they're going to be upset in the midterms. I mean, we can't rest on our laurels at all yet. There's still a bunch of people that are undecided, but things are looking good at the moment.
Yeah, the Republicans definitely cannot get complacent, but at the same time, it is nice to see that their meme of the blue wave is crashing. I mean, I personally don't think it was really ever there to begin with, but this isn't the only poll that's been getting closer. Granted, this is really the only poll that shows the GOP with the biggest lead that they have, but all the other tracking polls have gotten significantly closer as well. Most of them have Democrats up by just a couple of points, less than 3 or so points, which considering those were, plus 10 and higher just even a couple of months ago. Everything is showing that it's getting closer, and I think, just more Americans in general, as I see the state of the country right now, as I see what's going on, especially with the economy, and just how, the Trump administration is being treated, quality of life for people definitely has improved. And, when you have the Democrats out there spewing their nonsense day after day, you have so many people that are just so desensitized to stuff, and they know that the media is full of BS and everything like that. And whenever they do see good things going on, especially with, the North Korea situation was kind of shaky this week, even though this morning and yesterday and today we have a little bit better news to follow up with that. But that being said, as far as things are going right now, Republicans are actually in really good shape for the midterms, much so than the Democrats think they are.
Yeah. So speaking of Democrats polling badly, we did want to focus on one Democrat polling badly this week, and that is Claire McCaskill, senator from Missouri.
Yeah, and this story, once I saw it, I was like, okay, I have to put this in. A new poll by Gravis Marketing released Tuesday shows that Missouri Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill is trailing both of her main Republican rivals by big margins. The poll shows her losing to Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley, who's a Republican, 50-43, meaning she's at -7, and even more to former 2016 Libertarian presidential candidate Austin Peterson. She's losing to him 56-40, which is -16. Now, granted, the poll was commissioned by Peterson, so you can, it's arguable whether or not there's any bias there. But last week, a morning consult poll showed that more than half of Missouri voters say that they want McCaskill gone, with her approval rating in the state sitting at only 38%. That is the lowest job approval number for any incumbent Democrat up for re-election in a state that Trump won. So I really do think that, we know that the Republicans are going to gain at least a couple of seats in the Senate. Some people say as high as 6. Some people say it's just going to be a few. I don't know for a fact, but if there is one that I think, I'm not going to, go out on a limb and say, I'm absolutely certain of it. But if there's one I had to bet money on, in terms of just, I'm not saying who she would lose to, because, as of right now, Josh Hawley and Austin Peterson are the two front runners in that race. It looks like as if right now she's going to lose to whoever that ends up being. And I'm actually surprised that Austin Peterson was polling as high as he was in that race. I mean, I have met Austin Peterson. I don't think you did. But no. I've met the guy. I used to be kind of a fan of his. Not as much anymore, but I'm still following the race. And, obviously, if he does end up becoming the Republican nominee for Senate in Missouri, we would support him, especially, just on face value, we would support him in that race. But that being said, it's nice to see that she's losing in these polls, and I definitely think she is one of the ones that's going to end up losing in November. So, who she ends up losing to, it's yet to be seen. But, yeah, we're still following that race closely, and nice to see that she's not doing very well.
Yeah, and just so people know, the Missouri primary is on August 7th, so we'll know on August 7th who her competitor is. And the one thing I want to say on Austin Peterson is he does want to end the ban on automatic weapons, so I would support that.
Yeah, you have to remember who Austin Peterson is. He's a libertarian, okay? He ran for president as a libertarian in 2016. In terms of how many delegates he got for the Libertarian Convention, he came in second place, behind Gary Johnson, who ended up losing in the general, as we all know. I actually, back then I still was kind of a libertarian, and I supported Austin Peterson over Gary Johnson in terms of just the libertarian parties who I thought that they should pick. But that being said, if he ends up being the senator from Missouri, good for you, dude. Go right ahead. And
Yeah.
he definitely would not be as bad as a Democrat, even though I don't think he would be the best Republican out there. He'd be more along the lines of like your Rand Paul type of Republican. And although Rand does give us some kind of troubles here and there, for the most part he is on board with everything. And as far as Austin Peterson, I follow him on Twitter, I follow him on Instagram, I see what he's up to. And he would definitely be an improvement from Claire McCaskill. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So with that said, let's move on to the bomb stack for national news. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is Our Revolution. If you don't know what Our Revolution is, it is a group started by former Bernie Sanders operatives designed to promote progressive community engagement and pave the way for a 2020 Sanders run again for presidency. But according to Politico, the organization is falling apart and is now nothing more than a snarky Twitter account with a valuable contact list. Many Democrats are dissatisfied with the organization, with reports that the board members are hoarding money or refusing to help progressive candidates, while the organization's leader, Nina Turner, is trying to launch her own political career. Fundraising for the group is now a third of what it was a year ago, and things have gotten so bad that the Bernie team is trying to launch a super PAC, something that Bernie has long decried, to return the group to solvency, despite the group claiming that they are running a surplus and doing fine. This all puts doubt on the ability of Bernie Sanders to launch another run at the presidency in 2020. So this was a big thing that Bernie pushed after the election to try and foment the resistance. Bernie actually wrote a book, Our Revolution, and I've read half of it. It's all right. But this was supposed to be the big grand strategy for progressives to make an impact in this country. And it's in the gutters. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and when I've been doing my research into different candidates that are running for office here in these midterms, I do see a lot of them that are endorsed by Our Revolution. And whenever they are, I tend to, list that under them so people that are listening to this podcast do know who these people are. But yeah, it's nice to see that their whole thing is kind of falling apart. I'm glad to see that they're not gaining any traction, at least that's for sure. And, in terms of the ability for Bernie to run for president in 2020, he's going to be so old by then. I feel like he's going to get pressured into doing it, and he's going to
I believe he'd be 75.
He'd be quite old at that. He's older than Trump is, I know that.
Yeah.
But I tend to think that he probably will decide to run for president, but I really don't see him being the Democrat nominee in 2020, just for some reason, especially if groups like this do tend to fall apart. So, we'll see what happens, but yeah, it's just nice to see these socialists and communists, not gaining any traction.
Yeah. Moving on to the next thing, let's talk about House prison reform. So on Tuesday, the House has passed a prison reform bill that would expand prison work programs and spend $15 million on job training for the prisoners. If the bill passes, it will result in the immediate release of 4,000 inmates in federal prison. The bill has moved on to the Senate, where Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton leads the opposition to the bill. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley has said that significant changes will likely have to be made for the bill to pass the Senate, with Senate Democrats likely not to support the bill without the addition of sentencing reform. So this is something that I know President Trump supports personally, and that the House is trying to, or at least Paul Ryan's trying to say that, oh, this is something great that we're doing. I'm not really sure if I really care about them doing doing so, and there's been polling on if Americans care about prison reform at all, and only around 6% see it as a top priority.
It was less than 6. It was actually 2%. I know what poll you're talking about.
Oh, less than 6. Okay, only 2%. So, yeah, they're not really focusing on stuff that matters too much. They could not do this, and people wouldn't care whatsoever. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I feel like they need to be doing a lot more than prison reform. That's something that a lot of Democrats tend to talk about. They want to see done is prison reform. So it's just funny seeing that the Republicans are the one leading the effort on this. I find that kind of ironic.
Yeah, but I don't know. When they're trying to pass these bills that don't have any sort of viability of passing in the House without significant amendments, it just makes you wonder, what are you guys doing with your time?
Yeah, I totally agree. So,
yeah, let's move on to a speech that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave this week. So on Monday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in his first major speech, gave a long-winded talk against Iran. In the course of the speech, Pompeo alleges that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is carrying out assassinations in the heart of Europe. Experts have reported that they have no idea what he's talking about, with Iran not even being suspected of any assassination since the early 1990s. State Department spokeswoman, the State Department spokeswoman could not defend the statement, saying that, quote, he has access to information that I do not. I am not able to comment on that in particular, but he assures me that there is a basis for that point in his speech, and he stands firmly behind that. So, did you hear anything on this speech, Bobby?
No, I didn't hear a word of it, not even on Twitter.
So, it was like 12 different points of attack that Iran has to change for us at least to negotiate with them at all. And most of the points that he made in the speech were pretty ridiculous things. He claimed a lot of things that the Iranians aren't even doing whatsoever. And, it's gotten to the point where they just make up things about it, and all they have to do is just claim that, oh, they have information that you're not aware to. It's so insane that this is the basis of our foreign policy. They can't even be accountable to the American people whatsoever. Pompeo is just a really big warmonger, and I don't know if he's the right pick for Secretary of State at the moment.
Yeah, and I really don't like the fact that they're still trying to push, this anti-Iran stuff on us. It's definitely calmed down from the whole Iran-Israel stuff from a couple weeks ago, and I figured that would happen. A lot of people thought it would escalate, but it definitely hasn't escalated, but they're still trying to push it. But yeah, Mike Pompeo he just makes it seem really dumb, He makes himself seem really dumb in the process of giving this speech. And, if you're going to make claims like that, especially stuff that almost everybody around you is like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, you need to back that stuff up. If that means that you need to, declassify some documents, then declassify the documents. And if that, and I can see why they don't want to do it, because they probably don't exist. And if they did declassify the documents and they were real, then that would want people to push for war. So it's like, if you're trying to push for war, you'd think that they want to do that,
Yeah. One of the points that he made in his speech was that he wanted Iranian troops to all withdraw from Syria, which is so crazy because Syria is allied with Iran. They were invited to go there and help fight, the rebel insurgents there. The people that are unauthorized to be there are the Americans and the Israelis that are, still putzing around. It's like you don't hold any sort of standard of sovereignty towards Iran that you don't hold towards yourself. It's annoying, and I think it's bad.
Couldn't have said it any better myself.
Yeah. So, with that said, let's talk football.
Yeah. The NFL has announced a new policy on Wednesday that will require players and personnel on the field to stand while the national anthem is being played starting next season. The league is revising the game operations manual to reflect the new rules, but will scrap an old rule which required players to be on the field for the anthem, meaning that they will be allowed to stay in the locker room during the anthem if they don't want to come out, meaning if they want to protest, just stay in the locker room, dude. The league also said that it will fine teams if their players or personnel don't stand and show respect for the anthem, and the commissioner, who right now is Roger Goodell, will impose appropriate discipline on any league personnel who do not do so. And there's also a new poll that was released by Yahoo Sports and YouGov that kind of shows just where people stand on this. 53% of self-described NFL fans are in support of the new rule, compared to only 32% who oppose it. And there's some other numbers that I kind of want to go over here. So the general public, meaning not necessarily NFL fans, stand at 48% support, 32% opposed. So NFL fans themselves actually supported this rule more so than just the general public does. In terms of males, it's 50 to 33, females 46 to 31, and then when you break it down by race, white people, it's 52-32, which is about the same as self-described NFL fans. Whereas Hispanics, it's 49 to 19. So Hispanics support it at about the same rate as white people in the general public, but they oppose it a lot less. Now, the other number that's significant is among blacks, where it's at 29% support, 48% oppose. So you can see that black people clearly see this as a racially based issue, whereas whites and Hispanics, they don't see it like that. Males don't see it like that. And females even have a lower opposition rate than males do, even though that they have a lower overall support rate. So, in general, what's the takeaway is most NFL fans are in support of this, and it's actually a very small minority that are actually opposed to it. So, big win for the Trump administration, big win for, American patriotism, and it's great. I'm personally in support of it. You're at a job, you shouldn't be protesting on the job. No one wants to see that, no one wants to watch that. But it also proves that those NFL boycotts and the fact that their ratings were collapsing because people weren't watching games for this sole reason played a huge factor into this.
Yeah. I'm not someone that watches sports ever, and, I don't personally care much, but I was listening to the Laura Ingraham show on Friday. They had a guest host on, and they're taking calls on people on this issue, and some of the people calling in were so incensed. They're saying, I served in Vietnam, and I'm not going to stand for them disrespecting the country like that, and, that's the core base of the NFL at the present time. They can't get away with just pandering to leftists like ESPN does.
Yeah, especially since so many people that are outraged at it aren't even people that watch sports. Like we said, the general public supports this less than actual NFL fans do. And if you're the NFL, trying to, do good business models, you want to listen to what your fans want. And clearly, the fans are in support of this new rule. So, good news there.
There's one thing I got to ask you. I've heard that there's an owner that's willing to pay the fines for this.
I have heard about that. I'm not sure which owner it is.
I believe it was Oakland.
Yeah, I can see him being that. Actually, I'm not sure if it was the owner of Oakland. I haven't done my research to figure out which owner. I know that there was a couple of owners who said that they had issue with it, but clearly that was not the final judgment. What they wanted, but I don't know. Oakland's about to move to Las Vegas soon, so I don't really care what Oakland has to say. Let them move to Vegas in a couple of years as their stadium is being built there. Then I'll listen to what they say because I'm a fan of Vegas. So, that has nothing to do with anything. So I'm pretty much done with that topic.
Yeah, and with the last story for the bottom of this news stack for national news this week, definitely not the smallest story this week. We saved the best for last. And that is Harvey Weinstein was arrested.
Yeah, Harvey Weinstein, everyone's favorite, guy who didn't do anything bad and was, a great role model for feminists his entire life. Not to mention his little rape epidemic that he had there. But Harvey Weinstein, the once powerful Hollywood figure, was officially arrested on Friday after turning himself in to police in New York. Weinstein faces multiple charges, including rape and some criminal sex charges as well, stemming from dozens of women who have come forward to tell of their experiences with him. He was released, however, after posting $1 million cash bail as part of a $10 million bond, with constant electronic monitoring and a ban on him leaving the states of New York and Connecticut. So, yeah, they're going after this guy. They're going after him hard, no pun intended. But yeah, I like to see this guy arrested, and I'd like to see him thrown in jail for what he's done, because he's a creep, and yeah, he's a pervert, he's a rapist. What more can I say?
I forgot where he ran off to. He's just been off the face of the earth, it seems like, for the last couple months.
He's
ever
been
since
hiding.
The Me Too thing started breaking out.
He's been in hiding in New York. That's essentially where he's been. And essentially, that's kind of where he's staying, too. I think he has a penthouse or an apartment in New York City is where he's staying right now. At least that's what I've kind of inferred from these stories that people have written about it. But yeah,
they really should have given him a much higher bond for the amount of charges he has on him, though, because he obviously can post bail, because, bail is only 10% of bond.
Yeah, precisely.
I think that's a little ridiculous, but
a guy like him who owns a major company that, is funding movies left and right and making tons of profit every year, $1 million cash is absolutely nothing. But you know what? He was able to pay it, and I don't like that. But, here, I'll just say one last thing. If you're listening to this podcast and you are a woman, I don't even care if you're good looking or not, and if you're in the states of New York or Connecticut, be wary, because as of right now, Harvey Weinstein is out there, and he's coming for you if he gets the chance, until he's arrested again, and then, actually gets convicted. Because I figure, court of public opinion does matter a lot, and yeah, this guy, once he actually gets in the courtroom, he's going to get convicted of these things. I think we all kind of know that. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. He's in his 70s, I think, anyway, so it's not like he has that much longer to live. Knowing him, he'll probably, the very minute after he gets convicted, he'll probably kill himself. So
yeah, what I've heard is, when he was arrested and taken into custody, he was extremely, afraid and stuff, very frail about,
Oh, yeah. Did you see the videos of when he was getting out of his car, walking into the courtroom there?
No, I haven't.
He was surrounded by, reporters and people that were, hurling insults at him and screaming at him and, trying to, cops are, holding some people back in some cases. He's a very disliked person, and so, people are trying to get at him,
Yeah. I guess the last thing that I have to say of note of Harvey Weinstein, you need to keep in mind that he was a very prominent Democratic Party donor. He has direct connections to Hillary Clinton. And, it seems like all these people that have been caught for the Me Too stuff are leftists predominantly. So,
yeah, and just imagine if Hillary Clinton would have won, and this is a guy who would have had access to the White House.
Yeah.
So, thank God that didn't happen.
But with that said, let's get into some current year college craziness.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic. You're fucking a white male!
The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
Die, cis, scum.
You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us!
It's time for some current year college craziness.
Current year college craziness, segment of the show where we talk about the crazy stuff that happens on college campuses here and abroad, but mainly here because we're the best. We're the best at winning when it comes to crazy colleges. And the first crazy college we're going to talk about today is Harvard University.
Yes, Harvard University, everyone's favorite Ivy League school, is going to be hosting, or should I say, hosted a blacks-only graduation ceremony. Harvard University is hosting a graduation ceremony exclusively for black students, and they hosted it on May 23rd, which was earlier in this week. More than 170 students and 530 guests had signed up for the ceremony, which was crowdfunded by students and raised over $27,000. This year, the ceremony was open only to black graduate students, but the organizers hope to open it up to undergraduate students next year. Student Michael Huggins, who is graduating with his master's in public policy, said the following, quote, "This is an opportunity to celebrate Harvard's black excellence and black brilliance. It's an event where we can see each other and our parents and family can see us as a collective, a whole group, a community." Some of the students said that they wanted to do it to, quote, reclaim history from Harvard, which in their eyes was founded on institutional racism and a legacy of slavery. So you know what, Enzo? I'm clapping. Good for them. You want to go ahead and start bringing back segregation? You go ahead and do that. Because if you had a whites-only graduation ceremony, you would have everyone coming down on you. You'd have the SPLC coming at you. You'd have the ADL coming at you. You'd have the NAACP coming at you. You'd have everyone coming at you. You'd have people left and right, politicians, actors, actresses. You'd have everyone complaining that this was so racist. But you know what? Because it was the minority group that's oppressed, everyone's okay with it. Go ahead, raise $27,000. Go right ahead, have your graduation ceremony for yourselves.
I liked Michael Huggins' alliteration there, black brilliance. like this quote from him. Let's just read this and replace black with white. This is an opportunity to celebrate Harvard's white excellence and white brilliance. It is an event where we can see each other and our parents and family can see us as a collective, whole group, a community. You're not allowed to say that there's white excellence or white brilliance, but it's just so weird for someone to say that, black excellence and black brilliance, because it's just a double standard that's so blatant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to see what would happen if someone even tried to have a whites-only graduation ceremony at a college. Yeah, imagine trying to find a job the rest of your life. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that won't happen. Let's go on to the next story, and that is California students are lobbying universities to pay for abortions. Students from 14 different universities lobbied California State Assembly on Monday to pass a bill that would force all public universities to provide medical abortion services. The bill, SB 320, sponsored by Connie Leyva, would require all universities to provide medical abortions by 2022. Medical abortions involves taking two drugs that women can use to terminate a pregnancy less than 10 weeks old. The measure was inspired by a UC Berkeley student government resolution in 2016 urging the school's health center to provide medical abortion services. So, again, the California legislator presenting crazy bills that are, needlessly expensive to an already huge deficit in California. But it just seems so strange to me. The purpose of the university is learning, education. It's not abortion. It's
not free abortions.
I don't have a problem with abortion, but this is just stupid, And why do they have to pay for it? Don't they already have Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, especially in California, somewhere that's not exactly trying to ban Planned Parenthood from existing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure California's Planned Parenthood has good funding.
Which means this bill will probably end up passing.
Yeah, it probably will pass.
I don't know how they do it.
Let's go on now to another Ivy League school, and this time it is Georgetown University. Georgetown University recently held a community dialogue event about a new proposal to arm campus police in which white students were told not to come. The event, hosted by Georgetown United Against Police Aggression, ran the following description on their Facebook page for the event. It is time to talk. All of us have a story about GUPD. All of us know someone who has been targeted. Let's do something about it. Come this Tuesday for community and discussion. This space will center the voices and experiences of students of color. Allies for the safety of students of color. Allies are not welcome to attend this preliminary dialogue. And the grammar on that is
yeah, that grammar was all kind of screwed up there.
That's just how they wrote it. The group currently is fighting the proposal to arm the campus police, saying that police officers would pose a threat to minority students.
I mean, okay. It's not like I would want to show up to that anyways.
But, like, them calling their own allies a threat to the safety of students of color really shows what they think of these white leftists that are 100% on their side on, everything. But they still hate these people. They still see them as a threat to their own safety.
Not only that, I'm surprised that the Georgetown, campus police aren't already armed.
Yeah. But, you can't arm the police because what if they use that against a person of color?
I mean, what their goal is to do is first disarm the police and then disband the police. That's their goal.
Yeah. No, they want to legalize, criminality for people of color. And to do that, you have to make sure that the police, one, aren't armed, but two, disbanded after that.
Exactly.
One follows the other. So, and was that all the stories we're hearing called craziness?
That's all that we had.
Yeah. Not as many stories during the summer now that we're not in, the full swing of things. But with that said, let's get into international news for the week. Starting off with Asia. The first thing we want to talk about is China.
Yes, China has agreed to cut auto import tariffs. In a victory for the Trump administration, China's foreign ministry has agreed to slash import tariffs on certain vehicles from 25% down to 15%. They also announced the tariff on auto parts, including bumpers and seatbelts, will fall to only 6%. The move signified China's willingness to open up to more international trade and will help reduce the trade deficit between the U.S. and China. Spokesmen from both BMW and Ford welcomed the move, with the BMW spokesman saying that this will, quote, will certainly benefit the customer and boost the market to an even more dynamic level. The cuts will go into effect on July 1st. So, we have seen over the last several months that President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have been meeting, and they've been doing a lot of discussions about trying to get the U.S. trade deficit with China down. Just last week, we talked about how China said that they're going to be starting to buy more American products, which will help reduce that trade deficit. And now they're agreeing to cut their auto import tariffs. That's part of the reason why Trump wanted to put tariffs on China to begin with, is because of the fact that, they have a lot of tariffs on our stuff, but we don't have any tariffs on their stuff. So just, the threat of putting tariffs on it alone is causing these countries to be like, hey, I kind of want to come to the table and discuss this, which is leading to a lot better outcomes for the United States. So, if you can get that tariff or that tax that they have from 25% down to 15%, taxes on other things down to 6%, that's going to do great, not only for our economy, but China's as well, because that means that products in China are going to be cheaper than they otherwise would be.
And they'll sell more products.
Exactly. And so that helps U.S. companies, and it helps, Asian companies, especially Chinese companies as well. It helps everybody. So,
yeah. The establishment media, when Trump passed the aluminum and steel tariffs, went into this crazed frenzy saying that we're going to get into this broad-based tariff war. But if it wasn't for these tariffs, we wouldn't be at these renegotiations where we are now. We had to use the tariffs as a means to bring them to the table.
Which was the entire point.
Yeah, and that's, what we foresaw them doing to begin with. So this stuff's very good, and hopefully we can, communicate more tariffs being reduced on our products going into China in the future.
Yeah. And moving from China, we now move into North Korea. We have a couple of stories here to talk about this. So they're all obviously interrelated to each other, but we're just kind of going to go one by one. And first off, North Korea has finished demolishing their nuke testing site. On Thursday, North Korea made good on their promise by demolishing their country's nuclear testing site, which, if you don't know, is kind of like the northeastern area of their country there, with a series of huge explosions. The blasts were concentrated on 3 underground tunnels and a number of buildings in the surrounding area. Dozens of journalists from all over the world were invited to witness the demolition. So, The reason I wanted to say that story first before we move on to the next story is because the next story happened literally like less than an hour, less than 2 hours after they demolished their nuke testing site. And that was that Trump said that we're going to cancel the North Korea summit. Now, before I go into detail about this, it appears that it's back on. From what they've been talking about, North Korea kind of, when Trump said that we were going to not have this summit, North Korea immediately turned around and said, hey, wait a minute, we do want to be part of this summit. And, just this morning we had people from the U.S. have gone into North Korea to discuss continuing the summit. And I think Trump even said himself that, we're still planning on holding it in Singapore on June 12th. So although, the media kind of made a big deal about this, I believe this was on Friday I think this was on Friday that this actually happened. Or maybe it was Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. So it's one of those stories that it's kind of flip-flopped so fast that to say that it's still canceled would be incorrect. By all accounts right now, we are still planning on holding it on June 12th. So it was, canceled for a little bit, but it's back on. The reason Trump originally wanted to cancel it was because of quote-unquote open hostility that was shown by North Korea in response to some comments that Vice President Pence had made. They were, talking about this. But also Kim Jong-un announced that he is still committed to the summit, get this, with full denuclearization. Not partial, full denuclearization. So, in terms of that, it's still going pretty well.
The comments by Pence were saying that the comments by Pence that offended them was saying that they wanted to follow the Libya model in North Korea. Which, we know how Libya ended up. Gaddafi got taken out, and the entire country, which was one of the best nations in all of Africa, is now a shithole. And you need to control your administration on these comments that they're making. Pence just seemed really stupid on that. Yeah, he did. But there is one thing that I wanted to say, and my narrative that I was going to use for this was. It doesn't really count anymore because of the fact that the meeting's apparently still going to be happening, or at least the summit's still going to happen. But think about this. If you're the United States and your goal is to, get North Korea to not be a threat anymore, think about what we've accomplished already. We've already gotten all 3 prisoners released, and they've destroyed their nuke testing site. So they essentially don't have any more ability to test their nuclear weapons, and they've suspended their missile testing program as well. If those 3 things alone was all that got done, and then you never had a summit, that is an extreme victory that the United States has had over North Korea. And that's before you even meet to discuss denuclearization or anything else on the matter. But, so people were freaking out. And it's amazing the media narrative, because just the day prior, they were like, oh, Donald Trump shouldn't be legitimizing the rule of, this bad person, this totalitarian dictator of Kim Jong-un. He shouldn't be meeting with him and all this stuff. And then he cancels the summit. It's like, oh, Donald Trump is a coward. He doesn't want to meet. Oh, he's blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, you people are complete hypocrites. But that being said, it appears that the summit is still going to happen. But, I guess, what do you have to say about this, Enzo? In terms of, them destroying their testing facility, it's good stuff. But they also still have, nuclear weapons because, ostensibly they have thousands of tunnel networks. They can store it somewhere else. And their ability to rearm is, even if they did destroy all their weapons, they have so much uranium in North Korea, they could do it in about 6 months. So, I don't know. I'm just glad that we're still likely doing the conference because, denuclearization is important to the peninsula. And, just because you have the conference doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be successful. I mean, obviously, Trump's been making comments like, we'll see what happens. And it's kind of true, you never really know exactly what your outcome is going to be. You have an idea of kind of what you want, which, in terms of going into negotiations, is pretty much the best place that you can be at right now. But, there is one thing that I will say before I'm ready to move on to anything else, is that you have to remember this isn't just the United States versus North Korea. This is the United States versus China, and North Korea is an extension of Chinese influence. And so
everyone knows that if the Kim Jong-un regime is destabilized or taken down, you're going to have, potentially millions of refugees that are going to flood into China's borders. China does not want that. They've already put a bunch of troops on their border to make sure that doesn't happen. And, we talk about how the goal is to be, open up North Korea, try to make it more westernized. I know McDonald's already said that they want to open up a McDonald's in North Korea. So in terms of that regard, you're making a lot of progress. But at the same time, again, this is not just us versus North Korea. It's us versus China as well. And so China wants North Korea to come to the table, and they want peace in that region. They don't want nukes on their border as well. And so this is nothing more than just, Trump saying one thing and then China being like, okay, fine, you know what, let's talk. And which is kind of what we've seen from the whole tariff thing. So I'm not worried. I've said this entire time. I said this, privately to you. I still think that the summit is going to happen, even though they, quote unquote canceled it for like 2 days, and then it's like, oh, by the way, it's back on. So
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. That summit's in what, like 2 weeks or something?
Well, it says June 12th, so that's just over 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks from I think that's a Tuesday, I believe. So 2 weeks from this Tuesday.
June 12th is my brother's birthday. But yeah, let's move on to our next story, which is out of the Americas in Venezuela. So Maduro gets his second term. On Tuesday, incumbent Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was officially declared the new head of state for the period of 2019 to 2025. He secured 68% of the vote with slightly over 46% turnout. A number of countries such as the United States, Canada, Argentina, Spain, and Germany have characterized the vote as undemocratic and questioned the legitimacy of Maduro's re-election. The United States has introduced a number of new sanctions over the vote. So, we've talked a lot about the state of Venezuela, over the last couple months. It's progressively getting worse. And, I was seeing polling numbers on unfavorability numbers for Maduro, and 75% of Venezuelans do not like President Nicolas Maduro, so it is extremely likely that there is voter fraud for him to get 68% of the vote in the country.
Oh, yeah, you can guarantee that there is voter fraud that did that there. I mean, that goes almost without even question.
Yeah, so it looks like the reign of terror that Maduro has over the Venezuelans will continue, which is very sad.
But moving on now to Europe, we have the first story here, which is, what we named this episode for, and that is Free Tommy. Tommy Robinson, if you guys don't know, was arrested and sentenced to prison. Tommy Robinson, the British activist and former head of the English Defence League, was arrested and jailed on Friday for filming members of an Islamic grooming gang as they were entering court for trial. He was arrested for an alleged breach of the peace, even though he was literally just standing there and filming, which is not against the law. He was live streaming when he was arrested by 7 police who escorted him away and put him in the back of a vehicle. In a span of just 4 hours, Robinson was arrested, booked, tried, and sentenced to 18 months in jail. Many of his supporters, including his lawyer, believe that because of his anti-Islam beliefs, he will be murdered in jail. Thus, they see his arrest as nothing more than a death sentence. The judge in the case ordered a media blackout on the story, which means pretty much every local British news thing is not allowed to report on this. And even a lot of American places. I know Breitbart had an article up and they were forced to take it down. Thankfully, a couple of American news outlets were able to get some stories up. But that being said, a crowd of several hundred people protested his arrest in front of Downing Street on Sunday morning. So, I have said it before and I will say it again. The United Kingdom is a lost cause, dude. I mean, how can anyone stand what's going on in that country when this is, clearly a politically motivated arrest and a politically motivated sentencing that he just got. And it's unfortunate because, I can't really say if I'm like the biggest fan of Tommy Robinson. I definitely don't think he is a bad person, but he is definitely being, politically arrested and sentenced to jail. And unfortunately, if he can't get out, it looks like he's probably going to die in jail soon. So that's going to be extremely unfortunate if that ends up happening.
From what I've heard, he's already been moved to medical facilities in the prison because he's been attacked already.
Yeah, and it's it's obvious that that stuff was going to happen. Everyone knew it. That's why the judge made that happen.
Yeah. No, he was arrested and imprisoned for reporting on a court case, and also reporting on this case is also illegal now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
also, in regards to the case that he was reporting on, I've also seen things that the defense is going to motion for mistrial because of his reporting. So Muslim grooming gangs might get off scot-free because Tommy Robinson tried and filmed them heading into the courtroom, and now he's going to go to jail and likely die because he did so. For grooming gangs, the defense of grooming gangs, it's...
It's like, you know what? At what point does it no longer become a controversy to say we should just invade the United Kingdom and really establish true freedom that they have? You say, oh, we want to spread freedom and democracy across the world. It's like, how about you do it to this country that is, essentially becoming a totalitarian society in England? You can't defend this at all. No one can.
Yeah. Like, how can we continue with our current relations with the United Kingdom when they're acting so blatantly authoritarian and Orwellian, The Trump administration should have some sort of condemnation against the United Kingdom, but they're likely not going to do something of that sort for Tommy Robinson. It's just really bad.
Now, if anything, Trump should offer him asylum here in the United States.
Yeah.
So, I'm being politically targeted in my country. Please help me out.
Yeah. It's quite insane. Do you want to move on to the other European story now?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So a 60-year-old man in Sweden faces up to 2 years in prison over a Facebook post in which he said that Somalis typically have low IQs, despite being technically correct. The man posted, only every fifth Somali have an IQ over 70, on a Facebook page called Stand Up for Sweden in September of last year. According to prosecutor Paulina Brandberg, the post targets a protected group of people based on their national origin and is therefore hate speech. The defendant has neither denied or acknowledged the crime. According to British professor Richard Lynn and Swedish colleague Tatu Vahin, in their book IQ and the Wealth of Nations, which made a correlation between IQ rates and economic prosperity, the defendant is technically correct since the average IQ in Somalia is 70. The IQ research website lists the average IQ in Somalia as 68. So, posting factual things in Sweden is grounds to be imprisoned.
And that's going to happen here, too.
Hopefully we don't get to that point, but this is, the standard that most of Europe holds on these things now. And, everywhere we go with Somalia, we see tons of crime, especially in Europe, and that has to do with them having such low IQs. They can't assimilate into a society where, like, for example, in the state of Texas, if you have an IQ below, I believe it is 85, you are automatically considered in special ed. So the average person in Somalia would be considered retarded in the United States. And, you just have to let them run around and be themselves, and you can't criticize any sort of immigration policy that brings people that just won't fit into your society. It's bad.
Hey, at least Sweden finally made it illegal to have sex with someone without their consent.
Oh yeah, that's an improvement.
They finally made that into law. That's the way that they're going to try to go about the whole rape crisis without being explicitly, racist about it. Because we all know who's doing the raping.
Yeah. That was another thing that Tommy Robinson was, being censored for, was his statement that 90% of sexual predators in the United Kingdom were Muslim, which was a factual thing, but he was taken on Twitter for that.
Yeah, I know, right?
These European countries. Let's move on now to the last part of the international news, though, and that is the Middle East. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that the BBC has found that you can buy fake refugee papers in Turkey. An investigation by BBC Arabic, which I didn't even know was a thing, has revealed that documents allowing their bearers to freely enter the European Union are available for sale on the streets of Istanbul. The team found a supplier on a Facebook group and bought the document, a refugee travel document from a European Union country belonging to a woman who looked like the BBC reporter. And they did all of this within 10 hours of originally contacting the supplier. A British passport would have been much more expensive, costing around $17,000, but that was still available. In 2017, the BBC said that around 6,700 people attempting to cross into the Schengen zone were caught using fake documents. So, this is just widely available in Turkey, where they have millions of these refugees stationed there, and if they want to just make it into the European Union, all they got to do is purchase one straight off the street.
And you'd think that as a country, if you know that another country is literally allowing fake documents into your country to be just sold openly on your streets, you'd think that you would want to, do more about it. But unfortunately, it seems like there's not much you can do about this without fully invading these countries, just removing these people from power. Which, at one point, that's going to end up having to happen. I hate to say it, that's going to have to happen.
Yeah, Turkey is a very out-of-control country, and also technically our ally for some reason. Let's move on to the last story, though, that we have for this week, and that is Israel has announced plan for more settlements in the West Bank. Israel says it plans on building 2,500 new settler homes in the West Bank in violation of the 2016 UN Security Council resolution. This comes just days after IDF soldiers killed dozens of Palestinians protesting Israeli occupation on the Gaza border. Israel's defense minister Avigdor Lieberman said on Thursday that he was finalizing plans, and that he expressed hope that the Regional Planning Board, the High Planning Council in Judea and Samaria, would designate 1,400 housing units for immediate construction. Some 500,000 Israelis already live in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. So one thing of note that most people probably don't know is when he says the High Planning Council of Judea and Samaria is what Israelis call the West Bank, and they use that as a term to see them sort of legitimacy. But essentially, they're moving into sovereign territory of a foreign nation and building up houses, and they're going to use IDF soldiers to, kick out any Palestinians in the way and make sure that no one stops their construction.
Yeah, and I hate the fact that Israel does this. They don't have any authority to do this, and I'm not the biggest fan of Israel. I'm not also the biggest fan of Palestine either. But that being said, Israel's definitely not doing anything good here, and I think anyone can clearly see that.
And this is what I feared with us moving the embassy to Jerusalem. It gave them, at least in the Israelis' mind, more legitimacy to do things like this. The moving the embassy to Jerusalem, in their eyes at least, is a de facto annexation of all of Jerusalem. So they're just going to continue and move housing into Palestinian territory, fomenting more conflict, and more people are going to suffer because of this. So very bad stuff.
Yeah.
But with that said, that's the show for this week. What are we doing on time? We're
just under 2 hours. We're like hour 50.
Just under 2 hours. So, yeah, do you have any final thoughts, Bobby, before we go?
No, other than the fact that next week we're going to have a bunch of primaries, so once we get to that section, it's going to be kind of filled up.
We'll adjust for that, so we still try to get around 2 hours of time then, though. But I think we had a good show this week. We were very prepared for everything. And I just want to say to you listening, thank you for listening to another episode of Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.